Welcome to today's deep dive. Okay, let's unpack this. Notaries are kind of like the offensive linemen of the legal world, right?
Yeah, it's actually a pretty good way to put it.
Like you only ever notice them when they make a mistake.
Right, but the second they do, the whole play just collapses.
Exactly. Because otherwise they are completely invisible. I mean, we tend to picture someone sitting at a desk in a bank branch, right?
Yeah, just kind of clutching a rubber stamp,
Mindlessly verifying the expiration date on your driver's license.
which, treats the job as this ultimate bureaucratic formality. Like, we just assume the ink on the paper is the entire point of the interaction.
But today's deep dive is going to totally shatter that assumption for you because we're looking at the operational case logs, the service breakdowns, and field notes from this Massachusetts-based mobile notary service.
Right, hiremobilenotary.com.
Yeah, run by a professional named Hanson Webb. And he's been in the field since 2007. So our mission for today's deep dive is to uncover this hidden, incredibly high-stakes world of notarization.
It really is high stakes.
Because when you look at the day-to-day reality of this business, these professionals aren't just paper pushers. They're actually crucial frontline defenders in, like, life or death estate planning.
And navigators of highly complex global immigration cases, too. What's fascinating here is that the physical stamp is actually the least important part of the job.
Oh, totally.
When you dig into web service logs, you're really looking at a masterclass in risk mitigation.
Well,
I mean, the ink is just a byproduct of a much deeper, far more intense evaluation process.
and it happens during people's most vulnerable moments, right?
Exactly.
So to truly understand that evaluation process, we kind of have to look at the most intimate local level described in these field notes, which is estate planning.
Right.
Because this immediately changes the picture of where a notary actually works. Like you'd think it's always in some sterile office building.
Yeah, but it's not.
No.
Oh.
Roughly 30% of estate planning signings for this specific mobile service happen in hospitals,
Right. Hospitals, nursing homes.
hospices, rehab facilities.
And that is a staggering portion of the workload taking place right at the bedside. And, we have to consider the context of those environments.
Yeah, it's heavy.
It is. The person actually signing the document, they're often facing a terminal diagnosis, or maybe they've just come out of major surgery,
Right.
and they're dealing with documents that carry immense power.
We're talking about healthcare proxies, powers of attorney, revocable living trusts.
Exactly.
Like, these are the documents that literally dictate who gets to make the call to pull life support or who instantly gains control over, a lifetime of financial assets.
Which brings us to the core mechanism of what a notary is actually doing in that hospital room, and that is the assessment of capacity.
Okay, I have to push back on this, though, because this concept is hard to wrap my head around.
Sure.
A notary isn't a doctor, right, or a psychiatrist. So how can they legally or even ethically determine if someone is mentally fit enough to sign a document? It sounds like they're acting as some sort of legal bouncer checking your mental ID, not just your driver's license.
Well, they aren't determining medical fitness. They are determining legal intent.
Okay.
You have to ask why a notary exists in the first place. They are an impartial witness to a legal act. And if the person performing that act doesn't fully understand what they're doing, the act itself is inherently flawed.
So how does a non-doctor assess that?
It's not a medical exam. It's an active conversation. Like, a specialized notary won't just walk in and ask, "Are you John Doe?"
Right.
They'll ask open-ended questions. Things like, "Can you tell me what this document does?"
Mhm.
Or, "Who are you appointing as your agent today?"
Oh, I see. So they're looking for comprehension, not just a pulse.
Exactly. And the logs show how actively they manage this. A mobile notary will actually coordinate with floor nurses and hospital social workers to schedule a signing during what's called a lucid interval.
A lucid interval.
Yeah. So a patient on heavy pain medication, like Dilaudid, for example, they might be super confused in the morning,
Sure.
but perfectly clear and coherent by the afternoon.
But wait, what happens if they aren't clear? Like, what if the patient is heavily sedated or clearly doesn't understand that they're signing away their house?
The notary halts the signing.
Really?
They refuse to stamp the document. Period.
Even if the family is right there in the room, like, demanding that it gets done right now?
Especially if the family is demanding it. That actually touches on another crucial evaluation, which is undue influence.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, if an overly eager relative is kind of hovering over the bed, answering questions for the patient, an experienced notary will ask that relative to step out of the room.
Just to ensure the patient is acting of their own free will.
Exactly.
Wow, that sounds incredibly tense.
It is dense. But let's play out the alternative. Let's say that the notary just shrugs, stamps the revocable living trust for this heavily medicated patient, and leaves. 2 years later, the patient passes away. And a disgruntled family member who was left out of that trust decides to challenge the document in probate court.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Right. They subpoena the hospital records, the judge sees the heavy sedation on the exact day of the signing, and suddenly the entire estate plan is thrown out.
So years of careful legal work by an estate attorney just evaporate.
Exactly. So by refusing to notarize in that compromised moment, the notary is actually executing the ultimate protection for the client's legacy.
That is wild. By saying no, they're preventing a catastrophic future court dispute.
Yes. The estate attorney trusts the notary to make that real-time, boots-on-the-ground judgment call. And that's why Webb's service emphasizes that a specialized mobile notary brings, decades of capacity assessment experience to every single bedside signing.
Right. It's not about the ink.
No, it's about securing the legal integrity of the signature itself.
Okay, so that level of personal liability at the bedside is intense. But the liability scales up exponentially when we move from, the local hospital room to the massive international stage of immigration law.
Oh, absolutely.
Because a signature doesn't just need to survive a Massachusetts probate judge. Sometimes it needs to cross international borders.
And the second a document crosses a border, you leave the realm of local probate and enter this staggering maze of geopolitical bureaucracy.
Yeah, the case studies outline how documents heading abroad, like marriage support letters, single status affidavits, FBI background checks, they have to go through these intense authentication chains.
Right.
And it all hinges on one major dividing line, which is whether or not the destination country signed the 1961 Hague Apostille Convention.
Which was an international treaty that was specifically designed to end the nightmare of multi-jurisdictional paper trails.
Okay.
If a country is a member, you get a streamlined, single-step authentication.
Right. So if your document is going to a Hague member, places like Italy, Mexico, Brazil, Germany, you need a single-step apostille.
Correct.
It's essentially one certificate from the state or federal government verifying the notary's stamp. And the timeline for this ranges from, 1 day to 12 weeks?
Depending on how backed up the government agency is, yeah. But mechanically, it's just a straight line.
But if the destination is a non-Hague country, so places like the UAE, Saudi Arabia, or Vietnam, that straight line turns into a grueling 4-step embassy legalization chain.
Yeah, it's brutal.
Walk me through the mechanism of that 4-step chain, because it sounds like an administrative nightmare.
It really is an analog chain of trust. Because think about it, the government of Vietnam doesn't know who Hanson Webb is.
Right.
So step 1 is the notary stamping the document. Then step 2, the document goes to the state government.
Like the Secretary of State.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
and they verify that the notary is actually commissioned. Then step 3, it goes to the federal government.
So the U.S. State Department.
Exactly. Who verifies the state government seal? And then finally, step 4, it goes to the actual embassy of the destination country, who verifies the U.S. State Department seal.
So it's literally a chain of seals verifying the previous seal.
Precisely. And it is incredibly fragile. I mean, if the initial notary forgets to write their commission expiration date, the state rejects it.
Wow.
If the state certification is just slightly misaligned, the federal government kicks it back. You cannot mess up a single step.
And how long does that all take?
That entire process takes 3 to 8 weeks, and it costs significantly more.
Which brings us to the China update mentioned in the operational logs. And here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Because this is a fascinating anomaly.
It really is.
China officially joined the Hague Convention in November 2023, which means they should just accept the simple single-step apostille now, right?
By international treaty, yes. The ink is dry on the agreement.
But the on-the-ground reality is completely different. Many Chinese municipal authorities still stubbornly request the old, complicated 4-step embassy legalization process anyway.
Yeah, it's a classic case of diplomatic muscle memory.
This China situation is like buying a universal fast pass for a theme park, but the guy operating the roller coaster still demands a paper ticket anyway.
That's a perfect analogy.
Mm.
The sovereign policy changed overnight, but the bureaucratic trust just hasn't caught up.
So what happens if you try to force the issue? Like if you just hand the local Chinese authority the single-step apostille and say, look, your government signed the treaty?
You lose.
Really?
Yeah. In the context of immigration, arguing with the receiving authority is a fast track to denial. And we have to view this through the lens of USCIS, the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services.
Right.
When they issue a request for evidence, an RFE, It comes with a hard, unforgiving deadline.
So if you miss that deadline because you spent 4 weeks arguing with a consulate in Beijing about treaty law,
The case gets denied. A family might not be reunited, or an employee might lose their work visa and face deportation.
oh, wow.
Yeah, missing a tight immigration deadline because of a botched authentication chain isn't just an administrative oops, it's a life-altering disaster.
So you really cannot afford to be wrong about what the receiving municipality actually wants, regardless of what the Hague Treaty says on paper.
Exactly, which makes having an expert who actively confirms those real-world, on-the-ground requirements absolutely vital.
And there's another massive advantage highlighted in Webb's practice for these complex immigration cases, right? Language.
Yes.
Because Hanson Webb handles documents in English, Arabic, and French directly.
And the value of that direct multilingual capability cannot be overstated in legal settings.
How so?
Well, when a client speaks Arabic or French and needs a complex affidavit notarized, using a standard English-speaking notary means you have to bring in a certified third-party interpreter.
Which obviously adds cost and scheduling headaches.
It adds cost, sure. But more importantly, it adds immense legal friction. Because every time you introduce another person into a legal chain of custody, you add a potential point of failure.
Oh, I
The
see.
interpreter becomes a middleman. What if they subtly mistranslate a legal nuance of the affidavit? Or what if their own certification is challenged in court years later?
It turns the capacity assessment we talked about earlier into a game of telephone.
Exactly. By cutting out the middleman and communicating directly with the client in their native language, the notary drastically reduces the risk of misunderstanding and fraud. They can properly assess the client's intent firsthand.
Okay, so we've established the immense stakes on both ends of the spectrum here. We've got protecting a patient's dying wishes from a probate dispute locally
Right.
and navigating diplomatic muscle memory to keep a family together internationally. Having seen all that, I want to look at the business model itself because the data for HireMobileNotary.com is stark.
The numbers are impressive.
Licensed for over 18 years, more than 1,190 successful signings, a 99.5% on-time guarantee.
Yeah.
And they operate on a clear zone pricing model. So a basic in-office visit is one tier, local mobile travel is a higher tier, and long-distance travel is the highest.
And they specifically highlight their credentials to justify that structure,
What?
background screen, bonded, fully insured,
Right.
and crucially, an NNA-certified loan signing agent.
The National Notary Association certification website makes a massive point about this, especially for real estate closings. But I've got to play devil's advocate for the listener here.
Go for it.
Let's look at the economics. If I go down to my local bank branch, a notary stamp is usually free if I have a checking account, or maybe it costs $5 at a local shipping store.
Sure.
Why on earth would an attorney or a title company or an individual pay a premium tier, sometimes upwards of $150 or $200 to have someone drive to them?
Because you aren't paying for the physical ink. You are paying for the elimination of catastrophic legal friction.
Walk me through the mechanism of that. How does a premium fee eliminate friction?
Okay, let's use the real estate closing you just mentioned. A standard home mortgage packet can be 150 pages long,
Right.
filled with critical dates, initials, specific addendums. Now, a bank teller is primarily trained to handle deposits and open checking accounts. A clerk at a shipping store is trained to weigh packages.
Sure.
If you bring a 150-page mortgage packet to them, they're just going to look for the signature lines.
But an NNA-certified loan signing agent does more than just look for the signature.
They know the architecture of the loan documents. They know that the notice of right to cancel has to be dated perfectly.
Okay.
Let's say a generic, uncertified notary misses a single initial on page 42. Or they write the date in the wrong format. The documents get shipped back to the title company, and the county recorder rejects the deed.
And what's the actual economic fallout of that?
The loan fails to fund that day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And if it's a Friday, the funding gets pushed to Monday. The buyer's locked-in interest rate might expire over the weekend, which could cost them thousands of dollars over the life of the loan.
Just from one delay.
Exactly. The moving trucks are sitting in the driveway charging by the hour, but the keys can't be handed over because the transaction technically hasn't closed. A multi-million-dollar real estate deal collapses because of one missed initial.
So when an estate attorney or a title company hires a specialized mobile service, they aren't buying a stamp. They're basically buying an insurance policy against that exact nightmare.
They are buying certainty. I mean, a bank teller is not going to leave their shift and drive to a hospice center at 8 p.m. on a Sunday night to carefully assess the capacity of a heavily medicated patient.
Right.
And a generic dispatch agency might send a novice who just got their commission last week to handle a complex living trust. Consistency, extreme attention to detail, specialized expertise, that is the actual product being sold here.
It makes total sense when you lay it out like that.
The upfront cost of a professional mobile notary is just infinitesimal compared to the cost of a rejected filing, a denied visa, or a protracted court battle over a will.
That puts the entire profession into a completely different light. I mean, we started this deep dive with the assumption that notaries are just bureaucratic paper pushers.
Invisible offensive linemen.
Exactly, just waiting to mess up a play. But looking at the mechanics of Hanson Webb's practice has completely reframed that.
Yeah, it really has.
We've discovered that they are vital capacity assessors in highly emotional, vulnerable hospital settings. They are navigators of wildly complex international authentication chains. And they're highly credentialed risk managers for attorneys and title companies who simply cannot afford a single error.
They're the linchpin holding the execution of the law together at the ground level. Without that verified human touch, the legal system's trust just breaks down.
So the next time you are handed a stack of papers and told to just go get this notarized, remember the immense legal weight that tiny stamp actually carries? It's the final lock on the door of your intentions.
And, that leaves us with a really fascinating philosophical question to mull over.
What's that?
Well, the foundation of this entire practice is the physical human element. Looking a patient in the eye at a hospital bedside to evaluate if they truly understand what they're signing. Navigating the stubborn, illogical geopolitical quirks of foreign consulates. Building trust directly in someone's native language.
Right, very human problems requiring nuanced human judgment.
Precisely. But we live in a world that is pushing relentlessly toward fully digital, automated, AI-driven legal solutions.
Oh, really are.
We're seeing the rise of smart contracts on the blockchain, remote online notarization, algorithmic compliance.
Yeah.
It raises a massive question for the future of law. As technology attempts to automate the entire legal process, will the fundamentally human act of a witness, being physically present to assess the truth of a moment, become an obsolete relic?
Oh, wow.
Or, as everything else gets cheaper and automated, will that undeniable physical human element become the most premium, irreplaceable legal asset of all?